The holiday season grind has a lot of us seeing double, like the Double the Flowers deal from 1-800-Flowers. When you order the Holiday Light Roses Bouquet, you'll get double the flowers at no extra cost. To order now, go to 1-800-Flowers.com/Wingo.
And good Friday morning, everybody. Welcome in to another edition of Golic and Wingo. We are glad you have survived the work week, and we've made it to Friday, or as we like to call it around these parts, Fry-yay, as we are here. Glad you're with us. Trey Wingo, Mike Golic Jr. We are on ESPN Radio and ESPN2, as always, presented by Progressive Insurance, and all the phone guests joining us today will join us via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Got some great things coming up today. 7 o'clock hour on the East Coast. Field Yates will join us to talk about everything going on in the NFL. We've got Peter King at 8:05. He'll join us to talk about what's going on with the Cleveland Browns and how maybe they found the right guy, but did they do it in the right manner? Scott Frost, the new head coach in Nebraska, will join us to talk about, speaking of doing things in the right manner, how you make the transition from one coaching job to the other. And Jalen Rose will join us 9:30 Eastern in studio to talk about all things NBA, including what's going on with the Cavs and also what's going on with the trade of Jahlil Okafor to the Brooklyn Nets from the 76ers. Pretty interesting game last night.
Yeah, it was. For Thursday nighter, which we'll get into, the old Thursday night game and reasons we lost or reasons we won. But, it was a good game. And Matt Ryan, Mike, I heard you were on the way in. Just it's befuddling with his 3 interceptions, yet they're still able to get a win somehow. So two wins this season. Yeah, 2 wins this season, 2-0.
And the rest of the league is
0-23.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
It's just amazing. 2 of the picks were his fault, 1 not, going through Hooper's hands, the tight end. But you saw a big difference with some of the injuries. The Saints lost we'll get into this. Saints lost a lot of players, including Alvin Kamara, and the rushing game went down the tubes. A rushing attack that's second in the league. Atlanta's is 6th, and New Orleans at 2nd. Both of those teams relying on, a two-headed monster in the backfield. But between that and then I know we watch a lot of the college award shows as well. Certainly some good basketball going on last night with the buzzer beater for the Lakers and the 76ers. But Good things going on, but boy, Atlanta certainly helped themselves, putting themselves in a real nice position after last night.
Yeah, helped their chances. I think our FBI has them up over 50%. I think 52% now for their playoff odds going forward as they're neck and neck with Carolina. New Orleans still leading the division there, still a chance going forward to clinch, but going to have to wait a little while longer now as I think they're 3-1 in the division with another game against Atlanta left and then finishing up the season at Tampa Bay.
Well, look, they're behind both Carolina and Atlanta and New Orleans right now in the standings, but if they win out, they're going to win the division because they're all division games. So we'll get into that much later, but let's begin this Friday morning with what we always begin the show with.
It's time for Off the Top.
Whether you like it or not, it's just beginning.
With Golic and Wingo.
All right, and we start off the top with perhaps the shortest GM search in the history of the NFL.
Wow.
Give it to Cleveland because they once had a coach that didn't make it 365 calendar days. So I understand sometimes they expedite things. But Thursday morning, they fired Sashi Brown, who was their de facto GM, the executive vice president of football operations, however you want to call it.
Right.
And by last night, they had filled the job. They've named former Chiefs GM John Dorsey as the new GM of the Browns. He'll be introduced at a news conference today.
I mean, we all know the numbers that are horrible associated with the Browns since 99. 9 head coaches tied for 4th most, 28 starting quarterbacks. That's the most. They have a ton of draft picks for next year, including the conditional draft picks. So what are they going to do with them? To me, the most important thing is what's going to be their thought process yet again going forward. They switched to the baseball model. Is that now over? Is Dorsey going to clean house, in management and go back to what a lot football, way of going about the business where DiPodesto comes in from the Mets to do kind of the Moneyball thing? Is that done now? Are we done with that thought process and now are we shifting back to the old time process?
Well, now it doesn't matter.
No,
like you've gotten through the part of this that involved moving things around, collecting assets in the draft. Now you get to reap the benefits, and they're going to bring a guy in who's more of, I saw Field Yates tweet and said John Dorsey is a scout, and he's more of a traditional football scout in all the ways. And so he's going to go and make picks and use all of this great cap space, the draft picks, and the acquisitions from last offseason. And this is going to be a much better looking team, but it's not going to be because in large part of what John Dorsey's done. I think this is the system Sashi Brown left behind.
Well, look,
I'm annoyed.
Look, there's two ways. That's actually three ways to look at this. First of all, the cupboard is not bare. I mean, they have an extra first rounder, 2 extra second rounders, and a bunch of picks and tons of cap space. Okay, so that's the good news. And a guy like Dorsey, his track record is really good. Okay, I mean, you could make the case that they got the right guy, but they might not have done it the right way. You know, I know the Fritz Pollard Alliance has always said, wait a minute, has already raised some questions. How does this satisfy the Rooney Rule that they have a guy that they fire in the morning and they've already hired the guy, by Thursday night? And we'll get into that with Peter King and maybe with Field Yates a little, because there is a process that needs to be gone through here. But the Moneyball aspect, Paul DePodesta is still there for now. The question then becomes, when Dorsey comes in, is he going to be able to say, you, get out?
Right.
Because we've had the picks before with Cleveland. They just haven't picked the right players. You know, it's one thing to have the picks. You got to execute them the right way.
And that's the one thing with Cleveland, is you can't point to one regime, because there's been multiple regimes that have stunk in either A, picking talent, or B, developing talent. So there's plenty of blame to go around. So you just say, okay, new guy, throw it up against the wall, see what sticks.
I'm so sick of this idea that this is about them missing on quarterbacks and people pointing at Carson Wentz and Deshaun Watson and all these guys. You know what Cleveland's done a lot of in this time? Picked a lot of quarterbacks. And you know what they can't do? They can't point to one thing as the reason why. Maybe you're bad at developing, maybe you're bad at picking, but you've shown we can't rely on both. So for you to say, if we had Carson Wentz or Deshaun Watson, this would have been different, I have zero reason to believe it would have been different. This is on the whole system, and now you've bucked that system just because you look and see grass is greener on the other side at organizations that just happen to run themselves a little better.
I hear you, but later on in this show, we'll go through the list of quarterbacks they chose as the ones they could have had.
Yeah,
it is astounding.
It's staggering. Yeah,
it is the 1927 Yankees of bad quarterback drafting. By that, I mean it's the best bad drafting of quarterbacks you'll ever see in your life.
I'm just saying, you know what? Carson Wentz or one of those guys could have easily been in that graveyard, because what do we always joke? The Browns are an organization that just suck people in and drag them down to their level. I'm not convinced that any amount of talent could overcome the ineptitude at an organizational level that they've displayed.
That may be true. However, there is one constant theme that's been there over the last 8 or 9 years, and that's the ownership of Jimmy Haslam.
Yeah.
And you look at what else does Jimmy have to get involved with? Pilot J, which has had its all kinds of legal issues, and is he involved in Tennessee as well?
Oh, yeah.
And how's that
That's
working?
Right. Yeah, it worked out too well.
I mean, there's a bunch of issues there. We'll get into that a little later, but we will go through that list of quarterbacks. It is absolutely amazing. We continue.
Off the top.
Well, it is going to be a shocker if Baker Mayfield doesn't win the Heisman on Saturday, because he cleaned up at the College Football Awards show Thursday. The front runner for the Heisman won the Maxwell Award for Player of the Year, Camp Award for Player of the Year, and the O'Brien Award, Davey O'Brien Award for Best Quarterback of the Year.
Yeah, he did pretty well. He cleaned up, and I know, Trey, you have a really good poll question you're going to throw out there. We'll get to all expectations is not only will he win the Heisman, but the highest percentage of winner of a Heisman was Troy Smith at 91.3% or 6%, something like that. Will Baker Mayfield go over that? But congrats to the others. You know, Minka Fitzpatrick, who won the Thorpe Award for the best DB, Bednarik Award, one of the Defensive Player of the Year awards, James Washington, the Blitnikoff, was it Roquan Smith, the Georgia linebacker, the Buckus Award, Bradley Chubb was the Defensive Player of the Year in the Nagurski, the Mackey Award, top tight end Mark Andrews, Scott Frost, who we talked about as Coach of the Year. Ed Oliver won the Outland Trophy, which I know aggravates you because it was he's the defensive tackle from Houston, who is a stud
player.
Stud. There's Quentin Nelson, who you believe, and a lot of others. People say, "Oh, you went to Notre Dame, so that's why I think of it." But a lot of others think Quentin Nelson is the best offensive lineman coming into this draft. He's a left guard for Notre Dame, and then Orlando Brown, who was the left tackle for Oklahoma.
I just look at that and say, and this is no disrespect to Ed Oliver, who's a great player.
Time out. Whenever you start something by saying no disrespect, disrespect follows. But go ahead. I mean, that's just the way it goes.
I had so many people in my mentions using his future draft status as justification for this. This is a guy who plays for a Group of 5 school, so is not playing the Power 5 schedule and is playing grossly out of position. That's not his fault. He's doing what his team asks.
Right.
But playing him at a 3-4 nose actually seems criminal. What a waste of that talent to have him sitting there in that spot and just eating up triple teams for you. I get it benefits the group, but it really seems like you're putting a lamp under a bushel basket or whatever that saying is.
Light under a bushel?
Yeah, something like that.
You're bent about this.
I was really in my feelings on this one. I work on the Joe Moore Award. I watch a lot of the best offensive line in college football. I watch a lot of offensive line tape over the years and see a lot of this stuff. You'll be hard pressed to see someone perform as well as Quentin Nelson did, but him and Mike McGlinchey, both Walter Camp first-team All-Americans on the same side of that Notre Dame offensive line. And in all seriousness, Ed Oliver's a hell of a player. He's a ton of fun to watch, and only a sophomore. I mean, it's disgusting.
If he was draft eligible this year, he might be a top.
He's a stud because he'll get to move to a 3 technique in the NFL, and he's gonna really, really do well. I think
the first 5-star recruit in the history of that school.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they had 2 in that same recruiting class, I believe.
By the way, I put this up on a Twitter poll at Wingo's, and we'll probably retweet it at Golic and Wingo because of Baker Mayfield and the Browns. What's more likely to happen this weekend? No. Baker Mayfield doesn't win the Heisman, or the Browns win multiple games down the stretch? Because both seem pretty long odds.
And the Browns, by the way, play Green Bay, Baltimore, Chicago, and Pittsburgh. And you said multiple games, so that's more than one.
Got to be more than one.
Yeah.
Got to be more than one. Because when we started, could they run the table? And was like, well, that's not possible.
No,
maybe we'll give them one, but to make it maybe a little more difficult, they got to win 2.
Yeah.
By the way, the third option, as always, is Battlestar Galactica on that poll. All right, we continue with
Off the Top.
NBA news. The Nets have acquired Jahlil Okafor in a trade with the 76ers. Brooklyn also landed Nick Stauskas and a 2019 second-rounder.
Well, Okafor wanted out of there. I mean, listen, Embiid, what he's doing is ridiculous. He is so much fun to watch. Ben Simmons is, again, ridiculous for a 6'10 guard and what he's doing. He had his 3rd triple-double of the season last night in their loss to Lakers. So Okafor was who was obviously a high draft pick a couple of years ago, is just odd man out. He knew it's only played in a couple of games this year, and he wanted out. And now he gets out. He goes to the Nets, so we'll see what goes on there. What he can do, but he's a guy who obviously knows his ability is way more than what he's being able to show in Philadelphia and wants a fresh start somewhere and is going to get it. But, boy, the team he's leaving, I really love what the 76ers are doing, and Okafor gone from there.
It's amazing that we can sit here and talk about the Browns and can't just look and see exactly what the future holds for them in the 76ers. The Browns will probably win 6 games next year, and we'll all look up and we'll say, oh, yeah, this is exactly what we saw coming because he got Sam Hinkie.
Wait,
Sam,
did you just say the Browns will win 6 games next year?
Sashi Brown is going to end up looking like Sam Hinkie in all this. We'll probably end up talking about them like the 76ers.
Trust this process?
Trust the process.
Brett, our fine researcher, when was the last time the Browns won 6 games? That feels like
that's
it was
just horrific.
An eon ago.
That may take him a long time to find out because he has to go back in time for so long.
That is extremely optimistic.
Prediction's sure to go wrong, baby.
That is. I mean, I like it if you're a Cleveland fan. Heck yeah, but that is extremely optimistic. All right, we finish up
Off the Top
with more NBA and more 76ers. It was the Lakers surprised the 76ers in Philly on Brandon Ingram's last-second three-pointer.
Yeah, that was what a game last night. This is a very entertaining game going back and forth. Embiid, again, a monster with 33 points in this one, 7 rebounds, 6 assists. He was a monster in this. Ben Simmons, as I said, had his 3rd triple-double of the year. But it was Ingram who hit this. Lonzo Ball drove the lane as time was running down. Everybody collapsed on him. You looked at, and everybody does their percentages. Right. The percentage was he had a 44% chance as he was driving the baseline for that final shot, and it was a tie game, so they just needed 2 to hit that shot and get the win. But he kicked it back out because everybody collapsed on it. He kicked it out to Ingram, who was wide open for a 3, but the percentage of him making that was 33% as opposed to the 44% if Lonzo took the shorter shot. Bottom line is he made it and they won. I mean, so you sit there and throw out all those numbers. Lonzo is obviously not a great scorer at this point by any stretch. Certainly great at vision and seeing the court, and he gave his guy a absolutely wide open shot. Ingram knocked it down.
You think he'll go overseas and hone those scoring skills with his brothers?
Oh boy.
Go check that out.
Huh? You went there.
I mean, listen, it's out there. It's in the news. By the way, I know you guys were begging for a research team. Me and my crack research team of Google over here figured out the Browns won 7 games in 2014.
There you go. Congratulations.
Wow, good job out of you.
Well done.
Brett, you're fired.
Yeah.
Listen, that quick.
It's been a good run, Brett.
Yeah. Happens.
We'll miss you.
Nicely done.
Well, I won't, but
nicely done
will.
on your part.
What was the iron in Happy Gilmore? 9. What did he say? 9 iron? Well, you're fired.
Yeah. We'll move on. Yeah. And that was Off the Top on Golic and Wingo. But what happened on Thursday night really makes the NFC South a very interesting division right now because that was the first of 2 games over the next few weeks that the Falcons and Saints are going to pair up. And right now, the division is Carolina. And New Orleans at 9-4 despite the loss. Carolina at 8-4 because obviously they play coming up this Sunday and they've got a very tough game against Minnesota. Then you have Atlanta at 8-5. Now, despite all of that, because of division play and how these things will play out with tiebreakers, if Atlanta wins out because they play New Orleans again, despite the fact that they're in third place in that division right now, they would actually win the division.
Yeah, they would. They play Carolina again as well. The last game, December 31st, they're 0-1 against Carolina. They're 1-0 against New Orleans. New Orleans has already swept Carolina, and now they're 0-1 against Atlanta. So that game again in 2 weeks, and then if Atlanta can win that, the game against Carolina at the end of the year, they put themselves in a nice position, no doubt about it. New Orleans obviously still controls it all. Take care of their business, get this win over Atlanta in a couple of weeks, and they can be right where they want to be.
Yep. And listen, it's really going to be it might be the most fascinating division in football. And our NFL analyst and a guy I have on NFL Live all the time, Teddy Bruschi, says this one's the one to watch going down the stretch of the season.
Yeah, welcome back to the game, Atlanta. Here you are. You're back because now that entire division between you, Carolina, and New Orleans, you guys are going to pound each other out for the next few weeks, and the toughest man standing is going to be there. And there'll be possibly two of them in the playoffs, probably two of them in the playoffs. But this was very good, very huge, just a huge win for Atlanta to get because that defense making the play to win it. I mean, you won with your quarterback playing poorly.
Yeah.
Throwing 3 interceptions like that, making bad decisions, but you ran the ball. You played defense. It's December football. Here we come. You got to be feeling positive about what you did tonight.
You do, although it still is a concern because what is Atlanta's signature supposed to be? It's supposed to be that high-flying offense, right? 3 games ago, we had Julio Jones go for 259 yards. They were moving up and down the field. Then the last 2 weeks, they only got 9 points against Minnesota, and Minnesota has a very good defense. And last night, they sort of squeaked by with Matt Ryan throwing 3 interceptions. It's really been the defense over the last 2 games that has kept them in it. And if Atlanta is going to be what we think they can be and what they should have been last year if they just run the ball more in Super Bowl 51,
well, right,
they have to find a more consistent output on offense.
But I think you saw it, like they did run the ball 37 times, 132 yards. They controlled the ball for over 34 and a half minutes. So I think both these teams actually, because of the two-headed monster. Now again, Kamara went out last night in concussion protocol, so we'll see when they can get. They have the 10 days now, so you hope he'll be ready to go by the next game. But, Mike, I think both these teams we talk about December ball and playoff ball. Both these teams are dome teams, but both these teams can run the ball. As I mentioned, New Orleans, 2nd in the league, Atlanta, 6th in the league, which can help you, obviously, outside a dome to control it. Now, having an undersized defense and a speed defense, maybe depending on where you play, can cost you if you're playing in some bad weather outside. But I think from an offensive side, both these teams can run the ball well and can control the clock when they need to.
I'm interested in, obviously, the Saints. Alvin Kamara is in the concussion protocol, so it's not like a long-term injury that he can't come back from.
Right.
But it's scary how different this offense looked without him, right? We had lauded them for how well they used both these backs. I don't know what it would look like, obviously, if you remove Mark Ingram, and he was questionable going into the other night with a toe and ended up having to shoulder the bulk of the load, and it didn't go very well. Now, they had offensive line. They were on their 3rd-string left guard by the end of last night. They've had plenty of injuries up front in a group that still survived despite that depth. But they saw the game plan change. That first drive with Alvin Kamara, they're getting the ball to him on screens, on the edges. They're taking advantage of this guy's skill set, and you lost all of that, and that can be jarring during the body of one game. But you wonder going forward between him and Marshawn Lattimore, who was sucking wind on the other sideline coming off an injury, this Saints team that's been defined by Drew Brees for so long is going to end up being carried. They're either going to win or lose down the stretch on the backs of 2 rookies.
Yeah, they are. Right. Lattimore and Kamara, really quickly to the point about the running, they abandoned it. I mean, they were never out of this game.
Nope,
this was a close game.
Down the stretch.
And they only ran the ball 15 times. They saw they didn't have their two-headed monster, and Ingram, as you mentioned, had the toe, so they basically went away from it. Breeze threw it 35 times, and they ran the ball just 15 times.
Yeah, to your point, though, Junior, about the running game, just how crazy things are in New Orleans right now. When they had that 47-10 win, I think it was, over Buffalo earlier this season, that was the 25th time in the Drew Brees, Sean Payton era that they had scored 40 or more points. That was the first time they did it without a single touchdown pass from Drew Brees.
Right.
I mean, they're learning to win now in a very different way. and it almost felt like their safety blanket, Kamara, when he was taken away from them, they reverted back to the choo-choo-choo, let's throw it all over the field.
Exactly. It was really strange to watch because it's not like, to your point, it's not like it's been a running game that's only survived because of the backs. This is one of the leaders in yards before contact and yards after contact. To your point, the cephalopod, Alvin Kamara, is a large part of the region.
Bag of jelly, man. You can't tackle the guy.
You can't tackle the running back with no bones. It's physically impossible.
That was the first big hit I've seen him take all year long, and it was a freak play. I mean, it had nothing to do with the game being on Thursday.
No,
let's be clear about that. We'll get into that a little later. Get into that a little later. But
fired up, big boy.
We're pulling. It's like the lawnmower. You got to pull the chain to get it going, and once it goes, it's. He's gonna be mowing through some conspiracy theories.
Sharpen my blades.
Exactly right. You might be like the weed whacker. Just
that's
around.
true. String out,
Just take it down. Now, Matt Ryan was the MVP last year, but he did throw 3 INTs. So let's give our MVP moment to Mohamed Sanu, who caught 6 passes for 83 yards in the game tying in the fourth quarter. He also gave the ball to his son in the end zone. Or you could give it to the oldest man in the world, Matt Bryant, kicking a 52-yarder.
There you go.
But either one of those. We'll go with Mohamed Sanu, the MVP moment of the week, brought to you by Sport Clips. You watch sports, we cut hair. It's perfect. Sport Clips, it's good to be a guy.
Hey everyone, Mike Golic here. Support for Mike and Mike podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. With Rocket Mortgage, you can apply simply and understand fully so you can mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Mikes. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
Life happens. With ADT, you can feel safe with an ADT starter kit professionally installed for only $49. Call today and install an ADT starter kit that includes security panel, keypad, key fob, entry and motion sensors, and for a limited time, get a camera included and installed at no additional cost. That's a $449 value installed for just $49.
Requires 36-month monitoring contract, QSB, and Easy Pay activation. Early term fees may apply. Certain marks excluded. License available at ADT.com, Florida EF001121, Louisiana F1669.
By the way, did you hear Steve Kerr's comments about staying in Detroit?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's not a fan of the hotel where they're staying.
He irked Jamel Hill a little bit. I saw her come after
Apparently,
him.
They're staying at the MGM Casino Hotel in downtown Detroit, and he was lamenting.
I stayed there.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's fine.
Listen, anything that has the word casino in it,
You're good with it?
Good.
Steve Kerr, not so good with it.
Yeah, it doesn't seem so.
He was lamenting the back days when they used to play in the Palace.
Yes.
And they'd be out at Auburn Hills in Birmingham, a very nice, quiet community.
Yeah, he was not happy.
Not a fan of being downtown at the casino at the hotel. And
maybe did he have? I don't know if he's a gambling man. Maybe he had a bad day in there.
I don't know.
I don't know.
He sort of went around that issue. Yeah. It was more like there's too many people. I can't take it. Really wanted to get home fast. So finished up the game tonight. And you get home. You sleep in your own bed. We'll see what happens. Hey, by the way, today is the final day for V Week. Please join ESPN and the V Foundation in their fight against cancer. Go to visit v.org/donate. All donations benefit the V Foundation for Cancer Research. And when we say that, the administration of the V Foundation is fully funded.
Yes, it is.
So that's fully endowed. That's taken care of. So every time you donate, every single penny goes directly into research and the fight against cancer and finding a cure for cancer. So there's no administrative cost in
not
everything that you donate.
We understand everybody has their cause and things they donate to, and if you have something else, listen, fine. You're helping who you feel you need to help if you can donate to this cause, and we really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So as we continue on Golic and Wingo here, it was a stunning, fast turn of events for the Cleveland Browns, who fired Sashi Brown Thursday morning, and by Thursday night they had their new GM in John Dorsey. And everybody, well, not everybody, but I think most people would agree that John Dorsey is an exceptional hire here, right? He has a track record. We've seen what he's done in Kansas City. And he's been out there for a while. And I think one of the reasons the Browns wanted to act so fast on this is that they knew the Giants were also going to be looking for a new GM with the firing of Jerry Reese last week. Or this week. I can't remember. It all runs together. I think it was this week.
It was this week, yeah.
It was this week.
I think it was this week.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Anyway, so they knew that they were going to be in a competitive market.
Right.
So they wanted to get this thing done and get it done quickly. However, there are some people that are concerned, including the members of the Fritz Pollard Alliance, that did the Browns stick to the Rooney Rule, which means you have to interview minority candidates as well. as just bringing in somebody that you want and hire them in.
And most people think that was for coaches. No. It's not for coaches.
No, it's for front office people.
Front office people as well. So it's a rule that goes to the management side of it as well.
All right. So did that happen? Did the Browns mess it up? Well, here's our Browns reporter Pat McManaman addressing that topic.
Yeah, and they're also putting it out that they have satisfied the Rooney Rule, and nobody really knows how they did that, but I guess that will become clear over time. But it wasn't really common. I mean, the Browns' MO all along through all these changes, every time they do it, was been to wait till the season ends and then start then. They decided, and I would think the Giants situation had something to do with it, that they had to do it now to get their guy, and they certainly did that quickly. I will give them that. The questions are erased. We know that Hugh Jackson will be back in 2018, and the Browns can now concentrate on getting better.
So, we'll see what direction that goes. Again, they're not going to hire another vice president. That was Sashi Brown was. Right. Dorsey he's going to be the guy in charge. He's a guy that, to say old-fashioned and rely on scouting, I mean, that sounds ridiculous.
Call me crazy.
You still rely on scouting. That's obviously guys out there, bringing to him who they feel are the people that can fit the system that they want to run. But it's a fair question to ask to satisfy the rule. I mean, because of the firing and how quick the hiring was, to think and then to say you satisfied the rule. I mean, I think people are looking for a little more explanation on that. Were you interviewing people before you fired Sashi Brown to satisfy that rule? Did you interview others in what seemed like 3 minutes before you hired John Dorsey?
That doesn't feel like you're getting a full
Sashi
interview
Brown.
there.
So I don't know, but they should have to answer that, and they should have to show, whether it's to us or not, to the league, to the people that this rule is effective for, show them to say, hey, that we have satisfied this rule.
And again, they're having a press conference later on today, and I'm sure that question will come up. Look, there are a lot of things that you can point to about the Browns that actually could be positive. I believe they hit a home run with Myles Garrett last year, the first overall pick of the draft. Mm-hmm. When he's been healthy, he's been a monster on the field. Not so sure about Njoku and Jabril Peppers, the other two first-round picks they made. But they have an extra first-round pick this year. I think they have 2 extra second-round picks. They have 6 extra picks in total, and they have a ton of cap space. But let's be clear about one thing with the Browns going forward. They are going to draft a quarterback, and they're going to draft a quarterback high. And I know they took Deshaun Kaiser in the second round, and that may or may not work out. It hasn't. I mean, they haven't won a game with Deshaun Kaiser yet, but this has been a pattern for the Cleveland Browns, and I understand that you can't say all these other players would have worked in Cleveland because there are a bunch of different parameters, but the list of quarterbacks that they have chosen to draft as opposed to the ones they chose not to draft is astounding. And we can go back to when they came back in the league in 1999. The first overall pick was Tim Couch out of Kentucky. Donovan McNabb was second by the Eagles.
Right.
I think we can all say that would have been a better choice.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to 2000. They put Courtney Brown first overall. There were injuries there for the defensive end out of Penn State. I understand that. And, yes, everybody passed on Tom Brady that year.
Yes, they did, yeah.
I get that. However, Tom Brady was the 199th pick. The last team to pick a quarterback before Tom Brady, the Browns. And they went with Spurgeon Wynn. So they could have gotten that one. Let's go to 2001. Gerard Warren was who the Browns picked. Drew Brees went 32nd in that draft. 2004. They drafted Kellen Winslow 6th overall. Mm-hmm. Ben Roethlisberger went 11th to the Pittsburgh Steelers. 2005, they took Braylon Edwards 3rd overall. Aaron Rodgers went 24th. 2011, they selected Phil Taylor. Andy Dalton, not exactly on the same level as Aaron Rodgers or Ben Roethlisberger, but a very competent quarterback, went in the second round that year. 2012, they went Richardson and Brandon Weeden. Okay? He was the 4th quarterback taken. The 6th quarterback that year was Russell Wilson, 75th overall to Seattle. And, of course, in recent memory, 2014, they went with Johnny Manziel. The next 3 quarterbacks off the board, Teddy Bridgewater, Derek Carr, and Jimmy Garoppolo. And then in 2016, they got rid of this 2nd overall pick because Sashi Brown's quote, and that's one of the reasons he's not there, was he was like, we don't think he's a franchise quarterback. Yep. Folks in Philadelphia would certainly disagree. And they went and picked Corey Coleman 15th overall. And that has not really worked out, the wide receiver. And then, of course, last year they traded down from 12, and they got out of that spot, and Deshaun Watson went there, and they took Jabril Peppers.
I think a question to ask, because everybody, I get to ask this all the time when I go on in Cleveland, is whose fault is it? And listen, it's been going on since a lot of these stats are from 99. And there, as we said, there have been different regimes,
Yes.
even ownership.
To be fair, Jimmy Haslam got there in 2012.
That's exactly right.
A lot of this is predated
There's been
him.
new ownership. There's been different regimes from coaches to GMs. It's all been different. So that makes it very difficult to just point the finger and say it's this person's fault. One thing you can look at, though, one I think predictor is, because we can sit here and talk about, and the latest view of that would be a guy like Jared Goff. Yep. It was with the Rams and the former coaching staff, and basically everybody wanted to throw him on the trash heap. He becomes, a year later, he's with Sean McVay, and between, I think, natural development and a new coaching staff, he's doing what he's doing right now. So you named all the quarterbacks, that they took, or other players that they took as well. So you start going to scouting department, who you scouting, who you bring in to the GM to say we're going to pick, and who you picking, who you're selecting. And then after you select them, how are they being developed there? And if they're not being developed well there and they end up going somewhere else, how do they do somewhere else?
Right.
So then you can say, well, they were a bust. Were they a bust there? Or did they go somewhere else and they become a really good player? And all the names that you mentioned, not a lot of those names, A, did well in Cleveland, or B, went anywhere else and did well.
Correct.
So and that's something we can look into more and more, because there was a lot of players. There was a lot of high picks that were busts in Cleveland, not just quarterbacks. And you point to the very few, like those of like a Joe Thomas, who were fantastic picks.
2007.
But many more of them were not. So when they weren't, then you say, well, it was just the coaching staff. Well, then if they left Cleveland and went somewhere else, the player, did they develop and play well somewhere else? And there's a lot of players to look at to see if that happened. But not a lot of those names ring a bell and said, oh boy, I remember when they moved on to whatever team and became a Pro Bowler. So a lot of it is who you pick, who you choose to pick, and then how they're developed or what kind of a player they were. But that's what's maddening, Trey, is you can't point to, well, it was obviously this regime, or it was that general manager, or it was that coach, because there's been so many of them, it almost blows my mind. It's almost like with the Raiders. The Raiders have had more than a few coaches over the last umpteen years, right? And every year, they seem to lead in penalties. Every year. But it's different coaches, it's different people, players being picked, but every year. So you sit there and you want to say, well, if the coach isn't coaching against it, he's coaching for it, or whatever that line. Well, there's been a ton of different coaches.
Yeah, if you're not preaching to do it, you're not telling them not to.
So that's what gets damning about this. It says, who do you blame in that situation? That's what it is in Cleveland. That's why a lot of people, the Cleveland fans, just think they're just snake bit. And which is you're not snake bit. There's no jinx against you. But man, it's really hard to pinpoint the problem when so many different people have had a chance to pick talent and so many different coaches have had a chance to develop talent, and none of them have really done it at any kind of good percentage.
I'll tell you this, the Cleveland fans deserve better. I mean, they are that franchise has been over the history of the NFL one of the cornerstone franchises of the league, and they've put up with so much. And look, we'll get into this when John Dorsey is introduced today, but they've already basically said, Hugh Jackson's coming back for next year.
Right.
So you're already saddling a GM with a coach that he may or may not want, and I don't know how that's going to work.
No, that's exactly right. Most want to come in and do their own thing. One thing I think we know is they did what they should when they benched him a couple times. I thought it was wrong. They kept DeShone Kizer in there for the most part. If he wasn't to get benched or he got hurt and come out, he has come in there. He's thrown 345 passes. You're finding out about him. 6 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, to the point where I think everyone in Cleveland is going to agree they're going to try and fill that quarterback position yet again in Cleveland, where that just makes Cleveland fans go, here we go again.
Yeah. By the way, do you know the last Browns quarterback to win on a Sunday? Their only win was not on a Sunday last year. If you don't know, we'll let you know next. Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio and ESPN2.
I just saved hundreds of dollars by switching to Geico. I'm so happy, I feel like I can fly.
Disclaimer, you will not be able to fly by switching to Geico. This is against the laws of physics and nature. If you find yourself flying, please seek professional and or medical help immediately. In the unlikely event you find yourself flying, you might be a superhero, or a pigeon, or a superhero named Pidgewoman, who was bitten by a radioactive pigeon. If you are indeed Pidgewoman, Geico retains all licensing publishing rights in the event Pidgewoman the movie becomes a top-grossing Hollywood blockbuster.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
We asked you before the break, the last Browns quarterback to win a game on a Sunday. Was Johnny Manziel.
Johnny Manziel. How about that? Someone just showed a picture of Johnny Manziel getting into it. Was it what kind of a car? I think it was a Rolls Royce.
All right.
I think it was a sweet ride, that's for sure.
Where did you see that photo?
I don't, it's on Twitter or something. Said, is Johnny still riding around in style, I think was the headline of it or something like that.
Well, remember that Johnny came from big money.
Oh, yeah, without question.
Big oil money.
And he was a first rounder, even though he's in the 20s, it's still, you're making yourself some money.
But that was that was always one of the issues when Johnny came out was, did he want to be a football player? Did he want to be a football star?
Oh, it's exactly right. No doubt about it.
Because he had the money. He didn't need the money.
No, he did not.
So you had to love the game. You had to love the game to get that going.
That's my a little bit of fear for, and it shouldn't be held against him, is the talk of Baker Mayfield.
Is
that everybody loves this guy. He's a great leader. He's out there. He's gotten in trouble for some of his wild gestures, and some people are making comparisons. So he's kind of like Johnny Manziel, and let's not make any comparisons off the field. I'm not doing that at all. But how he leads on the field, and he's shorter like that, but he's certainly a lot more stocky. It's an unfair thing to do to him, but people do it anyway.
And speaking of something that you think is unfair, and we'll get into that, and this is going to be straight talk, ladies and gentlemen. There were a rash of injuries for the Saints in the Thursday night game, including Alvin Kamara going out on the first series. And after the game, Drew Brees once again railed against the idea of playing Thursday night football games.
It's 100% a product of playing on Thursday night. Do you understand what guys' bodies go through, in a game, and then to have to turn around 4 days later and to play? I mean, look at the injury studies. They're off the charts. So is this smart as it pertains to guys' health and safety? No, absolutely not.
So, listen, we've had Drew on this show many a times. My son was in camp with them, snapped the ball to Drew more than a few times, and Drew's been around. Drew's walking into the Hall of Fame, but Drew's flat out wrong. He's flat out wrong. All right? We've talked about this Thursday night stuff for a long time now. There are no differences in injuries. That is a proven fact. That is a statistic that you can figure out. And this stat is the last 4 years? You were saying the last 4 years, there is no increase in injuries
on a Thursday
night. There is no, and so there's the safe side of it, and then there's people say, well, it's sloppy football. It's flat as far as difference in turnovers on a Thursday night as compared to Sunday, and there's slightly more penalties per game. Say total penalties per game on Thursday, there's 3 more on average than the total in a game on Sunday. So I get a little tired of this. I really do. Now, if it wants to change and if it's going to change, so be it. But I just want to ask, again, I'll ask some questions out there, and we have more time for this, but it gets a little aggravating to me. I played on Thanksgiving 2 times, and I bring this up, and I don't know if people think it's a good point or not. Did anybody care when I played, or Reggie White played, or Randall Cunningham? Did anybody? I don't remember anybody saying, wow, I feel bad for those guys playing on a Thursday. It was, oh, man, I get to sit down, eat my bird, and watch 2 games. And now there's 3 games. So it was 4 teams. Now it's 6 teams. Nobody cared. Nobody brought up a word about, wow, they're playing on Sunday, and now they're playing on Thursday. Oh, my God, how do they do that? Because every team is doing it once. So now instead of 4 or now 6 teams that had to do it on Thanksgiving, now it is every team. I understand that. So it grew there. But there was no concern for that. 0. And now all of a sudden there's concern. So you want to tell me, well, with the head injuries and things like that.
Things have changed,
things have changed, but I just gave you a stat.
Yeah.
There are no more injuries on Thursdays than on Sundays.
Look, there are 2 separate points you're making there, and you're right. The only thing that we can point to statistically on Thursday nights is that there are more penalties.
Right.
And you can say that's because of a lack of practice time and the game's a little sloppy. I get that. The injury thing, you're right. There is no discernible difference despite what Drew was saying. We've just looked up the information. But the difference is, I think we're aware of many more things now that we weren't aware when you were playing. There weren't the concussion lawsuits. The CTE were 3 letters that we never put together in terms of football back when you're playing. So we are more aware of those things now, and we're trying to figure out how that factors in to whether or not these games should be played on a Thursday night. You're right. Nobody cared. The question isn't whether or not nobody cared when you guys were doing it. The question, should we have cared?
Should we?
And did we have
right?
the information to make us know that we should have cared?
So is the information, is it just about head injuries? Because we had an ankle injury last night. We had a groin injury last night. We did have one head injury. We did have that.
Kamara head-to-head. But that could have been on any play. That could have been on any play.
That's exactly right. So I really, and I'm asking, I don't want to yell about this, but I really want to ask, you know what? Stats show that it's not any different.
Yeah, that was Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. Coming up, we'll keep talking football and this conversation and more with Field Yates. That's next on Golic and Wingo. Stay with us on a Friday.
I just saved hundreds of dollars by switching to Geico. I've never felt more alive.
Disclaimer. Geico cannot guarantee you will feel more alive. You either possess functioning respiratory and circulatory systems, or you do not, or you are a zombie. If you are indeed a brain-starved zombie and you would like to save money on car insurance, the Geico legal team applauds your excellent life choices, even in your shambling afterlife. But we strongly encourage you to visit geico.com or download the Geico app. Please stay a minimum of 500 feet away from our large and presumably delicious, delicious brains.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
The holiday season grind has a lot of us seeing double, like the Double the Flowers deal from 1-800-Flowers. When you order the Holiday Light Roses Bouquet, you'll get double the flowers at no extra cost. To order now, go to 1-800-Flowers.com/Wingo.
Glad you're with us here. Field, there's a lot to get into here. You tell me, guest choice. Where do you want to start with the game last night, or do you want to start with the ongoing story of the Cleveland Browns? You pick.
Well, I think so. I certainly heard you guys talking at length about the game already so far today from last night. So maybe the Browns. I think this is a fascinating story that a team I think there's sort of a fun segment to be had here.
Yeah.
Things that lasted longer than the Browns GM vacancy. I tweeted this yesterday. Frank Gore was an Eagle for longer than the Browns GM job was vacant. For those who don't remember, Frank Gore a few years ago during the institution of the legal tampering period agreed to a deal with Philadelphia. Of course, nothing is final until it's signed. He subsequently backed out of that deal to go join the Colts. The bringing the band back together with Chuck Pagano and also Andre Johnson. In retrospect, I think Frank might have chosen the Eagles if he had the opportunity to do a mulligan. But the number it was. People are asking me, and when that move takes place yesterday, a lot of requests for radio and television and other commitments. Right. Why now? And I'm thinking to myself, sometimes you got to apply common sense. And I know that common sense is not always common, but you got to apply common sense. When a team makes a GM switch on Thursday, December 7th, when they're already 0-12, what is the difference between now and January 1, the day after regular season?
To beat the Giants, right? Isn't that it?
Beat the Giants or somebody else to the punch for a candidate. And, the idea that John Dorsey, less than 11 hours after the Browns announced their firing, would be announced as their new GM. And this has nothing to do with John himself. He's the person just being hired. But, it's incredible to think that a team could go through some of the requisite holes that you have to, or hoops you have to go through in order to satisfy or to successfully hire a GM. Of course, one thing that's like the elephant in the room is the Rooney Rule. Now, evidently the Browns satisfied the Rooney Rule. It may have taken place, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, it sounds like this GM search has been going on in earnest for a while. You can say, is that fair to Sashi Brown, who was fired yesterday? Whether that Rooney Rule was satisfied by an interview yesterday between 9:50 a.m. and 8 o'clock p.m., or it was satisfied previously, I don't know. But the process right here, I think, took a hit yesterday based off the optics of everything that went down.
Well, they're going to have to explain that. And I guess the question would be, people may still raise an eyebrow if it was within the 11 hours of Sashi Brown not having a job. But what if it was before that? What if it was while Sashi still had a job and they were interviewing potential new GMs?
And I wonder if, if we were to find out that the Browns interviewed a Rooney Rule candidate prior to Sashi Brown being dismissed, if they would say, well, actually, Sashi Brown was our VP of football operations. He wasn't our general manager. So we were conducting an interview for a position that, in theory, was already open for us. I just think at the end of the day, we have this massive, significant importance surrounding the Rooney Rule and the need for minority candidates to get their fair due. And there are times where it feels like it's nothing more than a placeholder in the process.
A box to check as you go to what you really want to do.
Do we do that? Yeah, we got that. And I get it. There are some deals that are done before they're even over, right? And before the previous reason is even over. There will be that way during the next coaching cycle, which will take place on January 1. At the same time, let's give a little bit of respect to the Rooney Rule. Like, if it's going to be, I almost think that, like, you should just get rid of it if you're going to ignore it, like some teams seemingly have,
or use it so arbitrarily.
Yeah, exactly. If there are times where I think to myself, is it accomplishing what it aimed to accomplish?
And that obviously is taking away from the hiring of John Dorsey, and that's a separate sort of compartment to this story, because you could make a very compelling argument that John Dorsey is the best candidate out there.
Sure,
right?
I mean, this was a guy that helped Kansas City. They were in the playoffs last year. They could be on their way to the playoffs this year. Obviously, things have tumbled of late, but I mean, if they win this year, if they make the playoffs this year, 90% of that roster is something, the tentacles of John Dorsey are involved with it. And, I mentioned this yesterday on Twitter, is that a lot of times when you're switching positions of, top lieutenants, you often go from, whether it's, hey, you fire an offensive-minded head coach, you go to a defensive-minded head coach.
Right.
You often swing to the other side of the spectrum. And for the Browns, for lack of a better term, Sashi Brown represented the analytics movement. John Dorsey is a scout. People are like, what does that mean? Like, he's the kind of guy that, like, there's probably nothing that John Dorsey enjoys more than, like, getting in a car in some remote part of the country and going and unearthing some small school prospect that winds up being a 10-year player in this league.
A Kareem Hunt.
Exactly. That no one else was thinking of. That's what he loves, that process. He loves the process of churning through the roster top to bottom. And the Browns have, they thought outside of the box a little bit with the Paul DePodesta hire and promoting Sashi Brown. We'll see what DePodesta's role, if there is one going forward, is. But they have found someone who is going to be worried first and foremost about finding good players in John Dorsey.
Yeah, I don't think that the way they were going, they're going that way anymore, and they gave up on that, it seems, pretty quickly. So you talked about Dorsey likes to go to the smaller areas and find those gems. Well, I think the Browns are going to want him to go to a big area and find a big-time quarterback. Any doubt in your mind that is exactly where they're going to go?
I have no doubt in my mind, and this is such a ridiculous statement to make on December 8th when we're, 4 months away, 4.5 months from Trey and the gang. And I know you guys are going to the draft this year.
Absolutely. Yep. We'll all be there.
So Trey's going to be working for like 30 hours that day. But it's such a ridiculous statement to make on December 8th. But I have no doubt in my mind that the Browns will take a quarterback with their first pick in this year's draft.
And that leads us to a bigger question, actually, because, look, it's been depressing for the Cleveland Browns, essentially, except for 1 year, since they came back into the league in 1999, the 1 year they made the playoffs with Kelly Holcomb as their quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
It's not that bad of a situation if you look at what the tools they have to work with. The question or the problem has always been executing the right use of those tools. Right. But they have an extra first-round pick. Again, I think they have 2 extra second-round picks. I think they have 6 more bonus picks. They got a ton of cap space. As you alluded to, it is a quarterback-rich draft. If you're John Dorsey, who has a track record of doing this other places, as bad as it's been for Cleveland, and it's been bad, there might be real optimism that someone who has a resume like Dorsey can actually make it work.
No doubt about it. And every time something notable happens with the Browns, I have a good friend, longtime friend of mine, Dan in Cleveland, and he calls me. He needs, it's like,
Dan in Cleveland, hello,
Dan,
you're on.
You're on the air, Dan. It's like cathartic for him to talk through some of these moves. And what we're talking about it yesterday, and I'm like, at the end of the day, as bad as it's been and as bad as it looks right now, if they get a quarterback, which I know is a 50-year if it feels like for the Browns, but there are times where teams stumble into a quarterback or a quarterback look at the Texans. Do you think they understood what they had in Deshaun Watson when they drafted him?
Well, they did trade up to get him. They did trade up to get him,
and then they didn't start him at the beginning of the season.
That's
so
a separate
at the end
issue.
of the day, at the end of the day, there is some credence to the idea that you can stumble into a quarterback and it can be a stroke of genius. I'm not taking away from what the Texans did or Deshaun. Right. But he exceeded expectations. For the Browns, if they get a quarterback that is a legit, surefire starting quarterback, whether it's Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, whoever you think it might be from this class, all of a sudden this entire roster takes on a much different shape. You're thinking to yourself, wow, not only do we have a quarterback, we got Josh Gordon, we got Corey Coleman, we got David Njoku, we've got a pair of running backs that are pretty decent, we got a good offensive line, defensively, we got a good front seven. All of a sudden you start to highlight those guys. But for now, it's yeah, we have, a couple pieces on defense, a couple pieces on offense, and a bunch of draft picks.
Let me tell you, Cleveland fans won't do that because they're too used to being burned.
Correct.
So they're not going to have any positive feeling until they actually see W's on the field. I mean, and I understand. And I do. I do understand that for how many times they've been burned with this.
Yeah, look, it's unfortunate, and we've said it a million times. They are a very loyal, although this year it seems like they're staying away more than ever before, but they are a loyal fan base that deserves a lot more. Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio and ESPN2. We're talking to ESPN insider NFL insider Field Yates, who co-hosts the Fantasy Football podcast, and of course it's playoff time. So we'll see what happens going forward. And again, John Dorsey's press conference will be later on today, and I'm sure they'll have some of that on NFL Live, and they can get into that there. But then there's the issue of what happened last night. How wide open right now do you see the NFC South? Because the way it stacks up right now, if the Saints had won that game, the Falcons were pretty much out of it.
Yep.
But now, because of who's left on their schedule, if Atlanta wins out, and we're not suggesting that will be easy in any way, shape, or form, but if they win out, they win the division. They control their own destiny.
They do. I believe,
if you believe destiny is something that can be controlled.
I knew they were coming back with a caveat there. I think both them and New Orleans can say that, right? If not, maybe all three teams can say that if they win out, they win this division. It is wide open. And the weird part about Atlanta is I keep thinking to myself, every time a Falcons game gets started, I keep thinking to myself, I still look at the ingredients on offense, and I'm like, look, they can hang with anybody in a given week offensively. And they go out last night, they win in spite of their offense, not because of their offense.
And they lost the last week because the offense wasn't there.
Exactly.
They scored 9 points against
Minnesota. So, Matt Ryan, it's got to get better. And that's such an oversimplified statement. But the kind of unforced errors he made last night, that's not so. Before I get too excited about Atlanta, like the quarterback, the MVP of last year's league, and by far the best player in football during the regular season last year, needs to straighten some things out. But they breathed some life into their playoff hopes, and I believe they have one more home game next weekend before they go on the road for 2 to finish up the season. So Atlanta still has a pulse here, and after last week's 14-9 loss to the Minnesota Vikings, I might have thought differently.
Right.
They're in the mix.
All right, well, so let's look at the NFC here, because essentially you have 3 teams that can possibly come out of the NFC South.
Yep.
Philadelphia's at 10-2. Is it possible for the Dallas Cowboys to make the playoffs? Yeah, but not likely. It's 6-6.
2% chance. Yeah.
The Vikings are 10-2. Is it possible for the Packers or Lions to make the playoffs? Yeah, but not likely.
Right.
Okay, so then it becomes down to this. Really, are we going to get 3 teams out of the NFC South, or are we going to get 2 out of the South and 2 out of the West with the Rams and the Seahawks? And again, remember, it's important, as much as we all love the Rams, and nobody loves them like our own Louis Riddick.
That's right.
Who's been all in since day one. Despite the fact that the Rams are 9-3 and the Seahawks are 8-4, one of those 3 losses is to Seattle in Los Angeles, and they still have to go, the Rams do, to Seattle. So when it's all said and done, it could be Seattle somehow, some way winning that division if they can get a tied record with the Rams. So do we believe that it's more likely to get 3 out of the South, or 2 out of the South and 2 out of the West?
I think 2 out of each division.
Yeah.
So I think that, again, just noting that Atlanta, yes, they do sort of control their own fate going forward, but how do I have confidence in them winning 4 straight games after the up and down play that we've seen from them throughout this season? I think ultimately, and this is I don't want to say that too many games in Week 14 are must win, but like both for Philadelphia and LA, this Sunday's game is massive implications. Like it could be the difference between Philadelphia playing at home
or being the 3.
Exactly.
Right.
Home field advantage throughout the playoffs, the number 2 seed, at least having a bye week, or the 3. For LA, like it could make a big difference in them potentially making the playoffs period, because as Trey mentioned, they already lost to Seattle once. They have to travel to Seattle, which I believe is next weekend. I think it's going to be 2 teams from each division. I just think the attrition in the NFC South, like someone, they're going to sort of cannibalize each other, and one team will, it'll be over the next 3 weeks, Atlanta will beat Carolina, or Atlanta will beat New Orleans again, and then Carolina will beat New Orleans, whatever it is. Like it'll work itself out to the point that Seattle and LA probably both get at least 11 wins, and they probably both emerge into the playoffs this year.
Well, New Orleans still obviously controls their own destiny, still leading that division, even with the loss last night. A loss Drew Brees basically blames on it being a Thursday night. Yeah. So you heard we played his rant. We'll do it again. Yeah. Says 100% the reason because it's Thursday night. He gave the wrong stat that said there are more injuries on Thursday. There aren't on Thursdays than Sundays. What are your thoughts on every Friday we have this discussion of people and players that complain about playing on Thursdays?
I totally get I can first of all, I can understand where players come from, because they probably think to themselves, like, after a short week, like like, what do you attribute this to? Like, hey, last night we had an atypical number of injuries, 6 in the first half, I believe it was. What was different about last night than every other week that we play? And the first thing that comes to mind is like, oh, we're playing on Thursday. That's different. At the same time, like you noted, there is not empirical evidence that shows that you are more prone or more likely to get injured on Thursday night when playing a game versus on Sunday when playing a game. And I think this goes back to, I want to say it was Richie Incognito for the Bills who was really disappointed in the game.
That was after the loss to the Jets, yeah.
And the point was, like, Notice how no Jets players were complaining about Thursday. Jets players were saying we got 3 extra days off.
Well, not only that, but that was the game where the Jets did all the dancing on the field.
Right.
So
That
became an internet sensation for about a week and a half, and that's when everyone was happy with the Jets. And then, of course, they've turned into doing more Jets things. But you're right.
Right.
Perspective is a wonderful thing.
It
right?
sure is.
If the Saints had somehow found a way to win that game and not throw an interception late in the end zone with all those injuries, boy, it's good now. We got time to heal up after these 3 games and get ready for this stretch run. This could be a bonus for us.
Yeah, and if we get to the point where there is decided evidence that shows that the shorter week lends to more injuries, then in a league where the unquestioned, when Roger Goodell's extension was signed a couple of days ago, we were asked, what should his number one priority be? And it's the same one should always be. The health and safety of his players. And if we have evidence that shows that Thursday games leave players more prone or more susceptible to injuries, whether it's head or otherwise, then we need to do something about it. Now, maybe that will never happen because there's so much money invested in the television side of it. But for now, we're going to have this sentiment probably every late Thursday night, early Friday morning, and mostly from the team that lost, but maybe on occasion from the team that won as well. And listen, it's a bummer for New Orleans that they lost massive key pieces last night. Alvin Kamara hasn't been maybe just the best rookie this season.
Right.
He's a legit case for the offensive player of the year.
He's been phenomenal
this year. And they were without him for all but about 5 plays last night.
Yeah, listen, they abandoned their running game, basically. They ran 15 times because Ingram had the toe coming into the game, and then he had to carry the load. I guess that's my point of the whole thing, because I don't want to rant and rave and scream, but there's a lot of tweets to go against this that we're going to still have this discussion. If you show me the data that can say, boy, this is so bad for the players, I am certainly willing to listen. I haven't seen it just yet.
Yeah.
All I know is when I played on a couple of Thanksgivings, it is a short week. It is a tough week. You don't put pads on. Like in this case, it's a division game, and I played the Cowboys in Philly, a division game. Now, when I was at the Dolphins, we played the Cowboys. It wasn't, so there's a little more into a game plan.
Was that the Leon Lett game?
Yes, it was.
Oh,
it was a Leon Lett game, yes. So, yes, it's more difficult, but, yeah, you don't put on pads, and then you have 10 days afterward on the other side of that. So I'm open to show me why it's so bad. I just don't want to hear from the losing team of why it's bad and this is the reason we lost. Show me a little more of that, and I'll certainly am willing to listen.
And I would say this: I'm not trying to take anybody off the hook or put somebody on the hook here. But imagine, from the league standpoint, imagine the sort of, I guess the conflicting emotions the league might feel and think about Thursday night football. When we get to I'm already sort of sick to my stomach thinking about not having a bunch of college football games on tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? It's the first Saturday without a full college football slate, and I'm already you kidding me? No. I need something. I need to kind of wet the beak. If we didn't have Thursday night football, everybody would talk about, man, I really miss Thursday night football. So the league is probably thinking to itself, it's a massive, massive business opportunity. It is not the only thing people are watching on Thursdays, but it is the thing that people are watching and talking about on Thursday night going into the game and then on Friday morning after the game. At the same time, you got players that are decrying the merits of Thursday night football, including, Drew Brees is not just, listen, all players are important, but Drew Brees is one of the faces of the NFL.
Without question. Walks into the Hall of Fame, sure. Yeah,
and certainly one of the most outspoken members that also has significant ties to the Players Association, the union. So, it's. I'm not saying it's. I don't have great sympathy for the league in this regard, but it's difficult. I'm sure there's part of them that is listen, if we found evidence, it will be really hard for us to keep trotting games out there on Thursday.
I agree with that.
At the same time, it's a business opportunity that's really difficult to ignore.
All right, Field, before we let you go, I wanted to ask you this because people may not know that before you became an insider, you actually worked with the Patriots.
Yeah.
Right? And you were a scout?
Worked in the scouting department for the Patriots and the Chiefs. Yep.
Okay. So a lot of talk has been made, obviously, of the Rob Gronkowski hit on Tre'Davious White and Tre'Davious White's response and all that kind of stuff. It was pretty clear right after the game that Bill Belichick knew something was coming.
Yep.
And when it was the little conversation that was caught on camera between Bill's head coach Sean McDermott and Bill Belichick. Just so people understand, how do you think Bill would have addressed that, not only with Gronk, but with his team and going forward and the things he would have said?
Yeah, I think that I don't know that Bill will probably would be as direct as hey guys, here's the play, here's what we can't do, Rob, this was moronic. But I think that Bill will use sort of that as a jumping off point to say, guys, we can't afford self-inflicted wounds. We just can't. You score a touchdown, you get a celebration penalty for whatever, doing something.
Right.
negative plays. Like, there's too little margin for error in the NFL. Too many teams are too good. There's too much parity. But, like, you think you're so much better than these, you think you're going to just walk into Miami on Monday and beat a team that you beat 35-17 2 weeks ago with their only, meaningful touchdown coming when Tom Brady had the football snapped when he wasn't even looking. Like, I think he's going to use it as much. And I also say this is, like, obviously it was a despicable moment and an action by Gronk, but there's always learning tools. That's I think a sign of a good coach is helping players elevate from their errors and the ways that they have gone wrong in the past. So I'm sure that he'll be reinforcing the importance of, like, listen, guys, the easiest way to get beat is to beat yourselves.
Right. Well, that's the one thing he says. Bill Belichick has always been consistent. Most games are lost, not won. Let's not lose the game.
Yeah.
Let's let somebody else make the mistakes, and then we can walk out.
They're the best at taking advantage of others' mistakes. So now he's going to say, listen, you're letting others take advantage of our mistakes.
Right.
Now. Right.
And that's the thing. And, I said that after the Super Bowl last year, and Patriot fans got all on me. I was like, well, that's Bill Belichick's motto. Right?
Yes, it is.
Most games are lost, not won. So I'm just telling you what your head coach, the philosophy of football he believes in. Field, as always, we appreciate you being with us.
Hey, everyone, Mike Golic here. Support for Mike and Mike podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. With Rocket Mortgage, you can apply simply and understand fully so you can mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Mikes. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLS consumeraccess.org number 3030.
Life happens. With ADT, you can feel safe with an ADT starter kit professionally installed for only $49. Call today and install an ADT starter kit that includes security panel, keypad, key fob, entry and motion sensors, and for a limited time, get a camera included and installed at no additional cost. That's a $449 value installed for just $49.
Requires 36-month monitoring contract, QSB, and EasyPay activation. Early term fees may apply. Certain marks excluded. License available at ADT.com, Florida EF001121, Louisiana F1639.
Week 2, Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio and ESPN2, presented by Progressive Insurance. All phone guests join us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Now, after we're done, Dan Le Batard Show with Stu Gatz comes up on ESPN Radio. And obviously, it's been a rough year for a lot of reasons for the NFL.
Sure.
We've had the anthem protests. We've had some big hits, a lot of suspensions. And I think there's been 9 or 10 suspensions. Well, 9 now that the George Iloka suspension was reduced to a fine, but we've had a ton of suspensions in the year. We had the Mike Evans hit on Marshawn Lattimore in Week 9. We had the fight with Aqib Talib and Michael Crabtree. We had all kinds of stuff going on in the Monday night game between the Steelers and the Bengals. The Rob Gronkowski play last Sunday on Tre'Davious White. So there's been a lot of bad optics in the NFL. And Dan Le Batard on his show basically said that he thinks going back to 2006, and the reason I think he used 2006 was that was the year Commissioner Goodell sort of began his commissionership, or maybe he just took that out of
right
for whatever. He thinks that he doesn't see the NFL, if you listen to the sound, in a better place now than it was a few years ago.
Is the league better than it was 6 years ago? Yes or no?
Yes.
No.
You don't think the league's in a better place 6 years from the day he took over?
No,
you don't think there's more revenues coming in?
The league is not in a better place today than it was 6 years ago. How can you argue that it's in a better place today? It was at the height of its power 6 years ago without the scandals, without the concussions, without the violence, without any of the issues. It was just money, glory, purity, without the anthem protests. I don't believe that you can argue that Roger Goodell deserves a pay raise based on him doing his job in a way that leaves the league better off than when he started doing it.
Well, that was 6 years ago. Just
right.
So he's talking about 6 years, not 2006. I'm sorry, I got that confused. But he's basically saying, is the league better off now than it was 6 years ago? And to his point, he didn't think it was because of all the things that are going on. Now, the point Stugatz was saying is the valid counterpoint to that is, yes, but look at all the money that the NFL is making and the revenue that the owners are bringing in.
A couple of things. First, I'm so tired of people worrying about what Roger Goodell made or person X made. Seriously, Dan? I mean, to say overpay. If somebody offered you $40 million a year, would you sign it? I mean, I'm amazed at, you want to be mad at anybody, go ahead and be mad at the owners for giving them the deal. But I mean, they worked out that deal and they signed it. I'm amazed at this. I was amazed at people complaining about, as I said, the basketball players you didn't know the name of that all of a sudden was making $14 million a year. So what? The money is there. The league can afford to pay those players that, and the players are getting it. The owners agreed to pay Roger Goodell all that money. So what? I mean, so what? The is he worth it or not argument is a ridiculous argument. You're worth what somebody is willing to take your signature for. So I just think that's a ridiculous argument. And as far as what the league is better or worse from 6 years ago, that's subjective. 6 years ago, the league made $8.5 billion. They made $14 billion last year. Better or worse?
Well, obviously, that's more money. Yeah.
So I guess it's all about what you're looking at. From scandals and PR and black eye to the public, it's absolutely not in as good a spot. Completely agree with Dan on that. So what are you looking at? The league financially is way better off than 6 years ago. Quite honestly, that may be the only thing the owners care about. And players, by the way, they make $8.5 billion to $14 billion. When you're splitting the pie the way you're splitting it, is more money to the players. So more revenue. Owners are happy. Players are happy. League to them is in a good place. From the public perception, as I said, Dan is right. With all the things that are going on, the game is going through the change with safety, and I get, so it's changing on the field, which is turning some people off away from some of the hits. Obviously, the anthem protest, and we've seen fights on a field before.
No question.
We've seen guys get thrown out before. Guys are getting thrown out at a higher rate now because they're cracking down more. So, yes, from the optics of how the league looks, 6 years ago, it's different. Some of the off-field issues that are going on, it looks different. So in that case, I agree with Dan. It's not as in good a spot PR-wise. Financially, you can't even make the comparison that it's not. It's way better, in way better shape than it was 6 years ago. So like a lot of things, it's how you look at it. What do you deem successful?
Right.
What do you deem better?
All right, so then that becomes the bigger question over the long play. What's the long play in terms of the NFL? Is it better because they're making more money, or is there concerns because of all the cracks we're seeing in some of the foundations?
Well, here's the long play as far that I see from the business standpoint is they made the 14 bill. Will that go down? Because ratings are down. Now, and we keep saying their ratings are down. All the other sports would even hope to have the down ratings of the NFL.
Absolutely.
So I get that. But you know what you don't look at? You don't look at that. You look at your own sport and you say, okay, we've had this. We've been used to it. We've got up to this amount of money. We've got up to this ratings. And now our ratings have gone down. Is our money going to go down? Well, we have to fix that. We have to fix that. And they do. They have had some bad PR moves. There is no doubt about that. So a lot of it is what the public thinks of you, because they're the ones that are going to buy the tickets. They're the ones that are going to buy the merchandise. And maybe even more importantly, the advertisers, while are spending millions and millions, and TV networks are spending billions and billions on your product. If you put yourself in a position where an advertiser can come to you and say, you know what? The product's not what it was. Ratings are down. Next time we get to negotiate this, we're not giving you as much. And the next time TV deals are up, the networks can look at the league and say, you know what? Ratings are down. We can't give you as much. So from that aspect, because let's be honest, it all revolves back around money.
It does.
So that's what the NFL, they're going to have to see. There are a dip in ratings, no doubt about it. Is that going to have effect on the bottom line? You think it will. It's going to be a matter of how much and then what they need to do to try and get that back again, to work through the domestic violence and the punishments and what's going on, the kneeling for the anthem and the protests and the way the game is changing and the animosity toward the players and the league. There are definitely, and these aren't small things to overcome. These are not bigger things to overcome.
Well, Mark Cuban sort of touched on this. He's sort of weighed in talking about the NBA versus the NFL. He said, quote, our demographic is getting younger. The NFL and baseball, they keep getting older. And I think what we're doing with the video game, NBA 2K, is brilliant. And in the bigger scheme of things, in terms of building fans for the future, what do you want your kids to play? I mean, of all the sports out there, do you want to go to a baseball game? Do you want to watch your kid play basketball? Do Do you want to worry about him a whole football game, or do you want to watch your kid play basketball? So, I mean, that's sort of the way that Mark Cuban is sort of propping up his situation.
And his sport is flourishing right now. Let's be honest.
I think our ratings on the NBA are up 24 to 30%.
Let's be honest. All the sports, the major sports that we cover, if you want to include hockey, we've kind of put that out of the major four. But baseball, basketball, and football, Trey, they're flush with money, right? I mean, look at the contracts that are going on. Look at them, and now you hear some teams or whatever losing money. You look at it how you want of where are you losing it, where are you gaining it. But they're all seem to be flush. The NBA, without question, is becoming way more popular. It's had tons of money relative to, especially to the amount of players they have on the squad of 15, as opposed to 53, and then add another 10 with the practice squad. I mean, it's in a fantastic place now, and it is popular right now. And we'd be fools not to understand that video games are part of it. Madden, how popular is Madden and the NBA games? And these things are so popular right now. And he's right about the younger crowd. What do they say in the stadiums for baseball? The average, I think the average age was 56.
Right.
So, you do have to kind of try and bring it down. But I'll say again, as far as the league, certainly worse in some aspects, better in some aspects. It depends on which one you want to look at.
And again, what you think the long play is for the sport. Right. I will say this, people are talking about the ratings being down. I can promise you that the NFL is going to get more money in their next deal than they did in the last deal for a couple of reasons. One,
different avenues, right?
Yeah, there's competitor. If someone's going to drop it, someone's going to pick it up,
right?
Because that still is the surest bet on television. Mm-hmm. It is the surest bet on television.
You're still getting good ratings.
Is an NFL game, and the other thing is they have other rights to sell.
Yeah,
the digital streaming rights. But they've been experimenting with Twitter and Amazon and Yahoo and all that kind of stuff. Right. Someone's going to want to come in and say, give me that.
So
as all we talk about all this other stuff, the dollar the next time around are still probably going to go up, and maybe by a significant margin for the NFL in their next negotiating right.
I just saved hundreds of dollars by switching to Geico. I've never felt more alive.
Disclaimer. Geico cannot guarantee you will feel more alive. You either possess functioning respiratory and circulatory systems, or you do not, or you are a zombie. If you are indeed a brain-starved zombie and you would like to save money on car insurance, the Geico legal team applauds your excellent life choices, even in your shambling afterlife. But we strongly encourage you to visit geico.com or download the Geico app. Please stay a minimum of 500 feet away from our large and presumably delicious, delicious brains.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
Stefania, of course, on the Fantasy Focus podcast, answering the bell and Fantasy Football Now Sunday morning. So you see Stefania everywhere. Not only is she a great fantasy football expert, she's also a registered physical therapist, right, and our injury expert. And one of the things I always get that wrong, by the way, when I
all right. I answered pretty much anything, but physical therapist is the important part.
That was the most important thing. Mike and I have been talking about what Drew Brees said after the game. It's clearly because of the Thursday night games, and the data that we looked from our research actually doesn't show that. And you have some more data about the actual injury rate when it comes to Thursday night games.
Well, every year the NFL puts out a health and safety report, and for those who might consider it suspect.
Skeptical.
Look, the data is compiled and then analyzed by an independent group, Quintiles. So they do all the data analysis. And when you're talking about the injury reporting, there's now an electronic medical record system, and they file the injuries through an electronic database. So injuries that are recorded, in other words, players injured on the field, and then the medical staff files that injury officially, it is then analyzed. And essentially, over the last few years, they actually have a graph they publish of injury rates per game. And in the years that I've been following, and every year I get the report, their comparison specifically of Thursday night games to games played on other days, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, shows that the injury rate is actually lower.
On a Thursday.
On a Thursday compared to those other days. And that's been consistent every year. So while the players may feel a particular way about it, the numbers don't actually support.
So let me ask you this, because we want to get a question about Ryan Shazier and what's going on there. But is there a cumulative effect? Could there be you play Sunday, you haven't fully recovered, you play Thursday, you may not get hurt, but is there something that could carry over even though it's now 10 days until your next
Sunday
game?
Or something?
That becomes the unanswered question, and that's something where that data hasn't been analyzed, and it's hard because it's multifactorial when you're talking about an extended period of time. So if we could look at that, and certainly when training perspective, you're talking about disrupting routine. As you well know, you have a routine Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You have less preparation from a technical standpoint, and maybe your body doesn't have the same recovery time, but the injury rate specifically is less on Thursday nights.
All right, Stefania Bell with us, and you alluded to it, Mike. We wanted to get to the updated news we had on Ryan Shazier, the news coming out yesterday that he had spinal stabilization surgery, and a lot of people have weighed in on what that means. And look, we understand that you have not worked with Ryan Shazier, you're not part of his medical team, but when people hear the word spinal stabilization, a lot of things go through their mind. What more light can you shed on what that potentially means?
It's very basic. When you have an injury to the spine that disrupts the stability of the spine, and that can either be the bony elements or the ligamentous structures that support the spine, and there's excessive motion at a particular segment or region of the spine, and you feel that that threatens, the medical staff feels that this is something that will not heal on its own and potentially threatens the neurological structures, then you go in operatively and surgically stabilize it. Usually that involves inserting hardware because you are then trying to limit that excessive motion and protect the neurological structures so they can continue to heal as best they can.
So right now, is this just a waiting thing? I mean, players are used to waiting a bit and then boom, right back into rehab to get ready to go. Is this completely just wait?
And again, because we don't know what the injury was on the field, but presuming that there is still healing to occur, it can happen over days, weeks, and even months.
Yeah, look, Jennifer Ashton, who was a medical expert on Good Morning America, weighed in on this, saying this is done for two reasons. Number one, either someone's neurological condition due to the injury is deteriorating or unstable or getting worse, so that might be habit, or it might be done for a positive reason. The surgeons might feel that someone could recover faster, better, have a safer recovery if the area of that injury is stabilized. So all we're saying is, look, this is what happened. We're still not sure what it exactly means, and we don't want anyone to be making guesses.
Boy, I certainly don't want to do that. So.
Yeah. I think the encouraging thing, he was transferred back to Pittsburgh,
yes.
and they did it there.
Right.
They didn't do it emergently.
Yeah.
When he was
right.
taken to Cincinnati.
Right.
We've heard about his good spirits. I mean, I think there's positives to take away from it.
Stefania, thanks very much. We are up against the clock. Coming up next hour, Peter King joins us on the Factory of Sadness that is the Cleveland Browns. And did they get it right this time? Golic and Wingo, stay with us.
I just saved hundreds of dollars by switching to Geico. I've never felt more alive.
Disclaimer, Geico cannot guarantee you will feel more alive. You either possess functioning respiratory and circulatory systems, or you do not, or you are a zombie. If you are indeed a brain-starved zombie and you would like to save money on car insurance, the Geico legal team applauds your excellent life choices, even in your shambling afterlife. But we strongly encourage you to visit Geico.com or download the Geico app. Please stay a minimum of 500 feet away from our large and presumably delicious, delicious brains.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.